That's it. Tatooine.
Tatooine is a key planet. Of course, it's where where we discover Anakin. And as it relates to the whole Star Wars universe, it's really the center of where it all starts. To actually have the opportunity to go back and build on those designs was fantastic. Of course, George wanted to push the boundaries even further, and so we took the design philosophy established by Ralph McQuarrie and others and started to really think, okay, how would this society actually function? I basically took Luke's homestead, which is a really elegant design, and just extrapolated it out.
Tatooine's the only location in Episode 1 that we visit that's shared from the original trilogy, and so it was important to me that it still could feel like the same planet. Tunisia was a very difficult location, mostly because of the temperature. We ended up shooting starting end of July into the first part of August, when Anakin and Shmi are saying goodbye. That sequence, it was 126.5 degrees when we shot that scene. Those are temperatures I've never experienced before, and I hope I never experience again.
I don't think they're going to need to build anything. I mean, they need to build just a little tiny bit of the ramp on a blue screen set.
The effects work is mostly set extensions. So when the Queen ship is parked in the desert, we really just had the ramp there. Any of the wider views was an 8-foot-long miniature that we had of the ship and splitting that all in. We had set extensions inside of the Mos Espa city. The set build went up to about 12 feet, and then we extended it and made the city larger and populated it. We added droids and other creatures.
As George was writing the story, he needed a centerpiece for this big action sequence, which was this huge race, which we called the pod race. We started researching Southwest in terms of butte formations, looking at the Grand Canyon for rocks, looking literally everywhere we could find exotic rock formations in the desert, and we just merged them all together.
A lot of shots were traveling at tremendous speed, and at the beginning of a shot, something that's way on the far end, way out on the horizon, would be going past camera. So it either meant tremendously large miniatures or helicopter plates, but exotic terrains that George wanted didn't really exist anywhere. That really leaves computer graphics of some kind as about the only real solution. To begin with, we started in the hangar beforehand. We had a partial set that we shot in Leavesden in England. And then the large pod race arena was about a 40-foot miniature that we shot out in the back lot, back at ILM, populated largely with ILM employees. It was a combination of computer-generated people and blue screen elements that we shot for mid-range shots. And then for shots in the pod race, we're actually flying through the arena. We had a bunch of colored Q-tips that were in the stands, and by playing fans across the back of it, you could get some subtle motion in the crowd so that they have an appearance of being alive. George pointed out that the thing about Tatooine is the skies aren't blue, that they actually have a grayness to them. And when we were in Tunisia, he's exactly right. You have this kind of yellowish dust that gets swept up into the sky and is kind of suspended in the air. And that yellowish tone of the dust neutralizes the blue of the sky and kind of adds up to a kind of a grayish horizon. And so we tried to make sure that that was always present in the shots that we did.
It was very interesting to build 18-pod engines, the engines and the pods. Well, the engines are the size of 747 engines. I mean, they're just huge. They're 20, 25, 30 feet long, 12 to 15 feet wide, which is over the maximum that any truck is allowed to take. And that becomes immediately a challenge. And it's also something we could never have done in the heat of Tunisia. It just would have been impossible. I think all of the engines took about 12 weeks to build. To have that kind of crew working in that kind of environment would have been very, very difficult. And it was much easier to build them and then transport them. The transport was fantastic, though. It was a really major thing. We could only drive at night. We had ferries that we had to put them on. We even flew a lot of the engines in a Russian MTV 800, which is the largest transport plane in the world. That was a lot of fun. Well, one of the problems about Episode 4, A New Hope, was that none of the records really remained for Tunisia. They hadn't had an opportunity to really find all the locations before they went there. They were on the move from the main part of Tunisia to a little island called Jerba, and no one had kept accurate records of where every single location was. And since we were not replicating them, but we were going to be in the same world, we wanted to try and find an area that would be much simpler than episode 4 was to shoot. And we needed to find an area that would combine all the elements of all the disparate locations that they went to. As it turned out, there was a very interesting article that had been given to me at Lucasfilm about a young guy who was getting his PhD. He was an archaeologist, and he decided to make archaeology very fun. So his thesis was written on where were the original locations on episode 4. And as soon as I read it, I realized he was the only guy. He'd spent months and months in the desert tracking down every single location. So I called him up. He was a really nice guy. And we sent him out to Tunisia, and we met him there. He immediately proceeded to show us where all of the locations, because all of us were obviously not on the original Star Wars. When we were traveling with David throughout all the areas, there was one little section in Jerba, whereas the main cantina was, and it had been rebuilt. It was a brand new modern street. I mean, there were basically condominiums surrounding it, and there was no way to actually picture where the original cantina was. But David knew precisely where it was because he had been there years before, and we were trying to talk to someone, and he took us into his garden. And as we were walking into his house, we saw one of the original cupolas in his garden, which he was now growing vegetables in. And we suddenly started to discover pieces, and we found the actual original cantina door about a quarter of a mile away, and it was being used as a door to protect a chicken farm. It was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. We saw it in the middle of nowhere. So there were little pieces, and we saw an older man, maybe in his late 80s, walking down the street with the original Star Wars t-shirt, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that that was probably worth $10,000 now.
You don't think Anakin can win?
Don't get me wrong, though. I have great faith in the boy. It's a credit to your race. But Sebulba there is going to win, I think.
Oh, no!
Why do you think that?
He always wins. I'm betting heavily on Sebulba.
I'll take that bet.
What?
I'll wager my new racing pod against, say, the boy and his mother.
A pod for slaves? Well, perhaps. Just one. The mother, maybe. The boy isn't for sale.
He's just a small boy. He can't be worth that much.
No.
For the fastest racing pod ever built,
No.
both of the bets off.
No pod is worth 2 slaves, not by a long shot. 1 slave, or nothing.
The boy, then.
I don't think so. The boy isn't for sale. Well, we'll let fate decide.